What's up everyone, it's Bench again. With the absence of Overwatch League and no showdowns, we decided to take last week off. Now, we're back with an all-contenders edition of Things I Like, Things I Don't. We'll cover the Contenders Showdown tournaments, why EU players are not getting looks from Overwatch League teams right now, and the Clockwork Vendetta hype. Let's go! Alright, let's get this out of the way first. I like the Pacific Showdown on principle alone. Finally getting some Tier 2 LAN events is huge for Overwatch. On the positive, the production was good, and that was something I was worried about coming in. Remember that production fiasco we had with the Overwatch World Cup last year during several of the regional qualifiers? The budget going into this event was a little scary, not gonna lie, but I think the end result was well put together. And while I'm on that topic too, I really enjoyed getting to see Avril and Pixie get an opportunity on a big stage like this. I'm not going to continue to pile on the praise train because the community has been really good in establishing how terrific of a job that pair did this last weekend. So this is just a reminder that Avril, he's going to be a star in this scene. Back to the competition though. Was it competitive? Not exactly. Was it predictable? Yes. Was it great Overwatch? Not most of the time. But here's what we learned. The Korean teams played well. The Chinese teams did not. Element Mystic did not look great to begin this past contender season, but what's promising is they continue to adapt and looked like the only team at the tournament who actually had a plan B. EM's win also led to a huge debate about where Korea matches up with the rest of the world right now, and there's been quite a bit of what feels like straw manning to make the case that the Korean Tier 2 scene is tops right now, and why this shouldn't even be an argument. But please, miss me with how Korea's past dominance in the World Cup is in any way indicative of which contenders region is strongest in May 2019. Just keep this in mind. Korea, while clearly the best region being represented at last weekend's Pacific Showdown, is arguably the weakest it's ever been since its contenders run began back in early 2018. Runaway is an incredibly strong team, and them losing the one game they couldn't in the last 10 months is tragic. Runaway, not being at Showdown, is not indicative of how good this team truly is. But going down the Contenders Korea table, you can't deny this is an overall weaker talent pool than we've seen in the past. Overwatch League continues to siphon talent from the region, that's true. And NA Academy teams continue to pull some of the top players away too. At least to me, it doesn't feel like we have the same volume of up-and-coming players in Korea that we did back in 2018. So what's the takeaway from Pacific Showdown? Well, Element Mystic is a really good team. Korea is a very good region. Comparing regions is fun, but watching them compete against one another, that's even better. Finally, it's here, the Atlantic Showdown. Personally, I never really thought teams outside of Korea had much of a chance at the Pacific Showdown, and so I don't know if I was ever truly as engaged as I will be for this weekend's event. Full disclosure, I'm gonna shout ignorance here and tell you that I don't have a clue whether or not low-key Esports has a shot at scoring an upset here. But I'm a-okay with being ignorant and excluding them from this conversation about who the contenders will be in Germany this weekend. Unlike this past weekend in China, it's more difficult to find huge gaps in quality between the 3 NA and 2 EU teams. With almost an entire month to prepare, I honestly don't feel confident putting out a ranking list like I've been seeing others do on social. 1 month ago, I think I would have told you that the top EU teams felt like the play here. Hurricane and Titans were both very strong GOATS teams, who also proved they can be good throwing other variants out there or running DPS comps outright. But the NA hype is real. Fusion Uni had some scares down the wire, and while they still won their region, I don't think Fusion's Academy side looked like the dominant force we've painted them as in the past. But don't forget they did manage to take their region with an unexpected substitution of Chongshik at main tank. ATL Academy is a team that coasted through much of the season, but they never really felt like they were in the very top tier, at least until they put a natural Zen player in Bird into the flex role and added Funny Astro, who is one of the best mechanical Lucio players in the world right now, not just tier 2. And despite being what felt like the odds-on best team all season in North America, it's Envy who I think is the biggest question mark this weekend, and it's only because I'm not sure how losing Trill for the event will actually play out. If Envy can somehow manage to get Stand 1 up to speed in such a short window, there's no reason they wouldn't have just as good a shot at becoming the champions as the other teams. But that's a huge if, and will likely be one of the biggest storylines of the entire tournament. I know it's not fun to take the safe route with these things, so here's my take. British Hurricane takes down both Low-Key and then an Envy team trying to fit in a new main tank at a really unfortunate time in the second round. Fusion Uni will squeak out its first match against ATL Academy in 5 maps, and then beat Angry Titans to face Hurricane in the winners finals, and I'm giving the nod to Hurricane again. Funi will advance through the losers bracket to set up a grand finals rematch, but British Hurricane will be your 2019 Atlantic Showdown champions. And please, don't at me when I'm totally wrong and low-key ends up one-tricking Clockwork comp to the title. For real though, we have so much fun with the which region is best conversation right now. Is it NA? Is it Korea? Is it EU? It's definitely not China, bruv. But appreciate this tournament. The top 5 teams are so insanely strong, and it feels like they are all so close in quality that there's no reason any of those 5 can't win this. So enjoy. It's gonna be a blast. So while we're on the topic, enjoy EU's representation at the Atlantic Showdown this weekend, because there's a good chance that this is the strongest we're going to see EU Overwatch for the immediate future. Adding just a single Overwatch League team expansion franchise to Europe in 2019 was disappointing to many, and now I think we're beginning to see the effects of how that lack of representation is trickling down to other parts of the EU scene, like Tier 2 and Contenders. In speaking with a number of the top EU players and teams, it sounds like OWL, at least since the beginning of the 2019 season, has had very little interest in trialing and adding anyone from EU at the moment, at least not directly. Despite sporting a very competitive and talented field this season in EU Contenders, neither teams nor players in the region are fielding communication from the top league right now. Instead, what you're going to be seeing after Atlantic Showdown is several top names from EU accepting academy offers in NA, which has become the new path to pro for EU. Essentially, any players competing in Europe at this point are being passed over entirely by OWL, and if they want to prove themselves and make the league one day, they're going to need to make one additional stop on their tour. The EU region has, for all intents and purposes, been moved below NA and KR on the figurative hierarchy. And why, you ask? It's difficult to say, really. The visa talk seems to come up here frequently, but of course that's a non-issue for teams who elect to sign Korean players mid-season. Sure, it's impossible to discount the success that all Korean rosters, or even mixed rosters like the Shock, have had in the top league to this point. But applying the Paris Eternal is garbage argument and believing that it in some way serves as a referendum on the state of EU Overwatch everywhere is not helpful either. I'm confident a much better Overwatch League team could honestly be built taking players from the top 3 or 4 teams in EU, and I'm not entirely sure that either Hurricane or Titans wouldn't be better individual rosters than Paris at the moment. If more and more top players are forced to depart Europe and play in NA Contenders to get looks from Overwatch League, it's hard to imagine EU is able to repopulate its ranks and remain as competitive over the next 2 seasons, and I think that's really disappointing. Clockwork Vendetta running Contenders trials is a really cool story, and I'm not taking any jabs at the players or team. This is about the conversation hyping the comp as the new GOATs. I just don't see how it's going to work at higher levels. Now, saying that, I fully realize we had the exact same conversation about GOATs almost 1 year ago to the day, and then Elk had to go back and eat those words when OG GOATs beat Fusion Uni twice in other tournaments. But this just feels different, and here's why. GOATs, or 3-3, was arguably the strongest composition that teams could run over the last year. And while it probably looked gimmicky at first, there's a reason, in addition to balance patches that have done nothing to curb 3-3, that we continue to see GOATs as a staple to this day. In fact, GOATs is so much of a staple that many of the teams who went up against Clockwork these last couple weeks had prepped as essentially GOATs one-tricks. And newsflash, you know what composition gets rolled pretty damn hard by what Clockwork likes to run? It's GOATs. I talked to some other coaches and several thought that Eternal Academy's team had the right idea by running DPS comps into Clockwork, but unfortunately, they didn't play them well enough at the end of the day. Despite EU Contenders getting labeled as GOATs one-tricks, and I always feel like I need to point this out, top teams in EU are very, very good and very comfortable running DPS comps, and ran them more often than regions like NA and Korea these last couple seasons. The natural counter to Clockwork already exists in EU Contenders, and good teams run it well. I wouldn't say Clockwork getting a win is out of the realm of possibility either, but there's no world where the top teams in EU Contenders don't stomp them next season. Thanks so much for checking out this edition of Tilted. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it and click that subscribe button for Elohel Esports YouTube channel. As always, you can find me on Twitter at BenchMobDC.